So I'm Jeremy Gross, and this is well, we'll introduce ourselves.
Chris.
James. I'm Dhaval.
And provisionally, the name of our app is Eat Budget. It's a meal planning app that allows you to tap into a database of recipes, pick recipes that you'd like to eat, you'd like to cook, and then schedule those recipes for use. It also allows you to build a shopping list of ingredients that you need to buy to make those recipes, and then to either email them out to yourself. We're going to start with a demonstration, so I'm going to pass it over to Chris. He's going to give a run through of it.
All right. So here's our homepage, and basically, what you're going to want to do first is look for something that you might want to eat. So let's say we want to have some pizza, okay? And breakfast pizza. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Let's try that. So first it's going to prompt you to sign in or create an account if you don't have one. So I already have an account, so I'm going to go ahead and sign in. So up here it says that I'm signed in now. So let's go back down. What was that? Here we go. Alright, so here's our pizza. Now, it'll show you the ingredients that are required to make this recipe. So on this modal, you would want to say, if you don't have any eggs, you check your fridge, you're out of eggs, so you can't make pizza. So you click on it, and it asks you to enter what you think eggs might cost for the next time you go shopping. So let's just say it costs $2. So what this would do is when you click on an ingredient, it will check the food API that we're using for the cost of a certain product. Like if you wanted to buy a carton of eggs, it would search the API for a carton of eggs at your local grocery store, and then tell you how much it would cost on the next page. So we're going to add that for Thursday for breakfast store recipe. Okay. So now we go to our meal planner page, and these are a couple of things that we searched for earlier. Here we have our breakfast pizza down here, and it tells us that eggs, that's the only thing we needed to buy, so the total cost for that is $2. And so we have some other things here, like our Indian spice oatmeal. We don't have baking powder, so we added that to our list of things that we need to buy for the week. So now we have our weekly planner. We're going to pick a day that we saved our recipes for. So we're going to start with Sunday the 29th, and that's going to show all the recipes that I saved. I did some of these beforehand, recipes that we saved and put into our planner for the week. So on the top is Sunday. We have breakfast, lunch, dinner. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday we just added at the bottom here. Wednesday is breakfast pizza. And if we go back to our My Recipes page, we can send an email to ourselves, and that'll send us a list of all the things that we need to buy for the week.
So we're just going to give you a start with sort of an overview of some of the different features of the code and what we use to make this happen. So if you don't mind pulling it up, but just the first thing you see on the first page there is so this is being rendered using Handlebars right here. And Handlebars, so for example, I think we saw in our class yesterday the Walmart page. It appears that a lot of some e-commerce pages will do this. If you just want to stamp out the same thing over and over again, straight from your model onto a page, a Handlebars template is a great way to do that. So I'll just show you real quick. That's index.handlebars, and most of what you're seeing up there is right here. Of course, we had our carousel. Got to have a carousel, and then down here. So, for example, if it doesn't find any recipes based on your search results, so for example, if Chris had just typed metal bolts instead of chicken, it would see that the database hasn't returned. There's a variable called recipe search. If it's false, then it triggers this right here instead of this code down here. If there are any recipes on record, then this variable here, this is coming from the controller, is true. So then it triggers this template right here, and this is a iterator helper in Handlebars, and it will just go over each item that's returned from a public API that we're using, that goes through our controller and then is sent to the view, and it goes through each recipe that's been sent and shows you the relevant data, like this.title, that's the title of the recipe, this.ready in minutes, it shows how many minutes that API thinks it takes to make a recipe, and it renders it all out to the page. And that's what you see happening on the first page there. Let's see. So I dealt with some of that as far as the front end went. James is going to tell you a little bit about how we worked on developing the data model or the database. I'll pull up the code there.
Okay, sure. So I started by creating the database, the schema, the seeds, connection, all that sort of stuff in Sequelize. One thing that I learned from this project, I don't know if you guys are familiar with decimal. If you're working with money, that's a good way to store things in Sequelize. And one of the things that we learned through the project is that you're going to have to sometimes go back and change the database to make it more flexible. Initially, the database that I had set up was a little inflexible. There was too much in one database, so we went back and with Jeremy's help refactored the database to be a little more flexible and store everything separately, the shopping list, the recipes, and the user info. Do you want to talk about the SEO real quick? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
So for the SEO, we did your standard keywords and meta tags and whatnot. We also created a bunch of social media pages to help the ranking. That's right. The favicon also. Still to come is the sitemap and robots.txt.
Right there, doing some SEO. When we ran it through Google Analytics, and it gave us the ranking. It was a little critical, but it told us good job on having a lot of above the fold content on the first page. So we got Google's approval, at least on that. And just going back to what James said, one of the key things we did with the database was separating the user profile from the shopping list database, so that and then also we changed the database, so rather than having it have entries for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and only allowing you to store 1 week, we allowed it so you could store whatever day in the year. There's some simple stuff, but we had to think through it and revise it as we went through the project. And then Chris is just going to tell you about, so we relied pretty heavily on a public API, a service called Spoonacular, which is has a lot of information available, but although they have a horrible front end on their own site, actually we were partly inspired by them to do our best to make a site that would be mobile first and mobile responsive, hence the heavy use of what are known as cards, basically just panels, something that would be very friendly if you're just swiping your thumb on an iPad or a tablet. And I think you saw that a moment ago.
Okay, so the API that we used is called, I believe they call it Food API, used by Spoonacular. And for usage in our project, the first thing we did was send it a search term, and that returns a very large number of recipes that are related to that search term. So then, as you saw before when we were going through the ingredients on the modal pop-up, when you would click on an ingredient, it would first check with the Food API. It would send it. It would do two requests. It would send the name of the ingredient in plain English, so just eggs, and then from that it would return a list of products, a list of eggs, packaged products. So basically, we picked one of those from the array, and then sent another request, which would ask for the price of that product. And if it returned that there was no pricing information for it, then we'd have the user input their own. And unfortunately, with the Food API, it turned out more often than not there was no pricing information for it. So having the user enter their own prices turned out to be a very heavy part of the project. So.
But initially we had it set up so that, actually we still do have it set up so that it looks to see whether any price is on record at all in the API and makes the appearance of an input box contingent upon whether or not the AJAX request gets back, like a null result or a record. So that was a little bit of a challenge to put that together, since it involved sort of ping-ponging a lot of things back and forth from the controller to the front end, and a couple of times back and forth in the same area of the code. Yeah. Let's see. So we have 1 minute. Okay. So our plans for the future. Here.
So just for the future going forward, we would look to add a geolocator, especially for the mobile if you're on your way home. Okay, I need to pick something up. I already have an email, but where's the nearest grocery store? So let me do that. And then we'd also look to monetize it with ads based on each ingredient added in a recipe. It would have an ad on the side that says, oh, ShopRite has this ingredient for $1.45. So we would look to monetize it that way moving forward. And I think that's it. Oh, one more thing. Sorry.
I would have liked to added more accurate pricing information. That was a big source of confusion and frustration for me personally. So I was looking at the Walmart API. I was looking at another one called Supermarket API. They both looked really great, but due to time constraints, we didn't have the time to put that into the project. So in the future, I'd like to add that.
And promise, one last thing, very last thing. We'd like to be able to allow people to track their own personal budgeting a little more closely, and then possibly to make that information publicly available in terms of people's sort of buying and eating habits in the form of a public API. Those are a couple of things that we could do, at least, that come to mind. I think that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
So when it doesn't find an ingredient in the API, it then triggers an input box, depending on what the AJAX request gets back from the controller, and depending on what the controller gets back from the public API through request, if that makes sense. Thanks. Anything else? Yeah. That's for future development. Yeah. That's correct. Yep. It's a prototype. Thank you very much.